World Financial Group offers entrepreneurs from all backgrounds the opportunity to start their own business on a level playing field. Dr. Yana Woodhouse, receiving the WCM Wall Street Pioneer Award by the United Black Wall Street of America, Inc., is one of those entrepreneurs.
I see WFG and TFA as a place where African Americans with an entrepreneurial mindset can flourish. And the bonus, we help families and serve the communities across the country.
To learn more about us, go to worldfinancialgroup.com.
We are the sons and daughters of the soul. We are resilient and forever forward-thinking. We ask for nothing else than the opportunity to live and to create the lives that we were meant to live. We want nothing but an equal chance at options and possibilities. The same possibilities and options to live out our potential as our fellow man. We want to be heard, understood, and expressive in our reality. We are the future. We are the creative. We are here.
This is Kia Rogers, and you're listening to Urbanology with my dad, Tony Rogers, on WHCR 90.3 FM New York.
Good afternoon. Tony Rogers here, your host for Urbanology, the Art of War. I hope, and for those who knew or don't know what that means, my full name is William Anthony Rogers, and while at City College for many years, and I write about, obviously, the master strategist Sun Tzu, whose famous book, The Art of War, was something that I been studying since my days in the military. Ho Chi Minh indicated he was defeating the American invaders using Sun Tzu's Art of War, which started a whole new thing. But nevertheless, we're here, and I'm always honored to have a good friend for over 60 years on the show, Professor James Smalls. And we're going to talk about the 100th anniversary and the celebration of Malcolm X. But before that, a young lady who's from Harlem, who is a member of the Harlem Tourism Board, has a show that's going to be this week, and I promised her that I'll, give her a little plug. And Matt, if you can play the clip on the far upper left is LaDon Taylor, and she has a number of groups. She has a whole group of women. This is just some of them. There are others in different shows that she has. She has all of these sisters. Well, they're multicultural. Matter of fact, I was laughing. They're all young, and talking to all of them, I said, I felt like Iceberg Slim. No one knew what that was, and for you older people, you'll know the joke. But nevertheless, LaDon and Will B celebrating their event this Saturday at the Laurie Backman Theater, May the 17th at 9:30, and that's located at 407 West 42nd Street. You can probably call the theater if you're interested in tickets or so much, and tickets with interested in tickets as such. Try to see them. Talented women. Uh, Sister actually was the first black princess in the Disney franchise, but she's now from Harlem. So just wanted to give her a plug. Thank you. Oh, this is one of her. And that's what done. This is their last show. If you want to see some, and the show is from the Stevens. So each one of these sisters has a certain icon that they sing. They can do it very well. But if you get a chance to see them, and welcome them to North there, Harlem Red, and members of the Harlem Tourism Board. So if you missed them this Saturday again, you'll be able to catch them when they come to Harlem. But this Saturday, they'll be at the Laurie Beacon Theater, May 17th, 9:30, 407 West 42nd Street. If you get a chance to see them, I'm sure that you'll be happy. And again, supporting some people from Harlem. We have a lot of talent here. Now, one of the things that I'm always learning from this brother since 60 years ago when I was in the Panther Party and he was trying to kick me off the campus of City College because he said, "You can't do that here, brother." And I was wondering why. Eventually, I went to City College and he helped me to understand why I was so good in philosophy. He introduced me to Leonard Jeffries and so many Dr. Ben, so many people who have influenced me for now and I'm sure for the rest of my life, and maybe others, since I have an ability to talk to people with Soul City and WHCR. But a brother that I'm always proud of. I always see him doing things, and he is like a brother. I mean, it's been a little over 60 years we've been working together. So please welcome Professor James Smalls.
Thank you, Brother Tony. And it really has been 60 years.
Yeah, man. Michael Tabor and the Panther Party and all of that stuff. So,
long time.
We both, don't look our age.
We're trying. We're trying to just.
But and before we leave, we have to talk about Africa and Ghana because there's some things that you're doing there. But the 100th anniversary, you have been doing ceremonies for Malcolm X, Elspeth, for over 50 years, brother. So tell us a little bit of what you feel to be able to have been with him, been part of the nation, seen all of the stuff that many people haven't seen. You're one of the last people that can give a record of what took place. So give us a little talk, James, about the feeling that you have to be doing this and taking part of the life of Malcolm X.
Yes, sir. But I was never in the nation. That's one of my blessings. But I met Malcolm at age 16. That was 1963. My mother was a follower, but not in the nation. Two of my cousins was in the nation. Brother Albert, who was the barber down on 160th Street, was my cousin. And my older brother, who would join Malcolm after he leaves the nation, along with a whole host of other cousins. So they were my primary influence. And that's how I got to meet Malcolm in 63, because I saw him on television. while I'm living in South Carolina. And I told my mother I wanted to meet him. My mother and father lived in New York, so she brought me up. And I got to meet him on 141st Street and 8th Avenue. He's giving out flyers with the brothers against the March on Washington.
Okay.
And the only thing I remember, there was a brother with me named Dwight Green, Whitey. And the one thing I remember, he told us that education would be one of the primary things that will free our people. That stuck in my brain. Because I didn't understand how the nation worked. I was talking about leaving school. I thought you had to leave school to join the nation. Right? But he said, no, you got to stay in school. So he was my impetus for going on to college.
Mm-hmm.
When I got back to South Carolina in September, I was so Malcolm X. The white leadership turned very much against me. So by the time I graduated in June, on the very day of my graduation, I had to leave to go in the Navy because I was the reservist, and they changed my orders to get rid of me, to get me out of the town. But I did have a nice young white friend who was my commander, Ray Roberts. Hi, Ray, in the ancestral realm. He got me out of the Navy by August so that I could attend college at Savannah State, where I had a football scholarship. I ended up going back in the Navy because of the race issue in Savannah, and nobody told me that I was integrating the Naval Reserve headquarters in Savannah, Georgia. And that didn't go very well. And so I had to leave Georgia and running into the Navy, trying to hide, to get away, thinking people would be coming after me for some other things in response to what we had experienced there, being the only Black in this institution. While I'm away, my brother tells me that Malcolm will be in France because he knows that my brother and me, we wrote each other every week. And so me and about 4 or 5 of the brothers, we were stationed in Cannes at the time on a Mediterranean cruise in the U.S. Navy. So we come over to Paris to where Malcolm was to speak, but he's not speaking. The thing has been canceled and nobody has an explanation. So we go back to Cannes and think nothing of it. Sometimes things don't happen. We go out to sea, and about 3-4 weeks later, I get a big parcel, and it's from my brother. And it's all of the clippings of Malcolm's assassination. And he also sent me the clippings on John Kennedy's assassination. And so I created a big album portfolio of this. And I was, with the little I knew about Malcolm, I'm trying to talk to people about him and show them my portfolio when the Central Intelligence Division of the Navy sees them. You know, I'm like an 18-year-old. I'm not really heavy into understand the politics and the dynamics of it. So I don't know why y'all take my clippings. I was so naive, but there was no explanation. I couldn't get it back. So it was a struggle. I was a part of an organized military, paramilitary, I guess you want to call it, Black Force. We call ourselves the Split Brotherhood in the military. And so when I come home, and I'm sure you experienced some of the same things, we had to fight to wear natural hairdos. We had to fight.
Yeah, I was at the Fort Hood.
Yes, and we had to pay fines for wearing our hair natural and those kinds of things. So I get home in the fall of '66, and I immediately go, the day after I get home, to the OAAU's office. And no one was there. So the next day they're having a rally on 125th Street. Huge crowd. And it's being addressed by Malcolm X's sister, Ella. So I wanted to show how much I had learned in my military skills. So I maneuvered through the crowd, maneuvered through her security, go up to the stage and put my hand on her feet. Just set it right on top. I don't know why the hell I did that. I just set my hand on top of this lady's feet. And the brothers jumped me. And she said, leave him alone. She leans up, asks someone for a pen. She writes the address of the headquarters on 139th Street and told me to be there Tuesday at 7 p.m. And I took the note, turn around, walk away. I go there at 3 p.m. Because, you know, I'm military. I got to be cautious. And a lady answered the door, but it's not the lady in all of the African dress and everything. It's an old lady with an old rag on her head, a dress that was torn, and a feather duster. And I didn't recognize that this was the same lady.
Mm-hmm.
So I told her I was there to see Mrs. Collins, and she told me to come back that night at 7 o'clock. That Miss Collins would be there at that time. So I show up at 7, and sure enough, the lady's now back in all her beautiful African gala, and she's sitting in the center. And since I was one of the new guys, we would call up front to tell who we were and why we were there, and so forth. We had already been vetted by a brother named Willie Stocks, who headed the security team, but now we had to say this to everybody. And I remember Queen Mother Moore was also, I meet her the first time at that night. And I got along with the people easily, especially the head of security, who was also from South Carolina like myself. And in about 3 weeks, Hisham Jabba, the man who buried Malcolm, came to me and said that the security wanted to have further talks with me. And they did, and they had about 3 meetings like that with me. And then I was asked, would I be willing to go to Boston and serve on Ella's security team?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, fine, but I got to consult my family, my mother, my father, my brothers, and others who. And because all of my family, when Malcolm left the nation, they left the nation.
Mm-hmm.
So I consulted with them, and they said that'd be a good thing. And the next thing I know, I was Ella Collins, president of the OAU, sister of Malcolm X's bodyguard. And within a couple of months, I was the chief bodyguard and the chauffeur and sometimes the cook, and doing all of these things and traveling all around the country. And I began to recruit brothers from the military to join the OAU. Brothers who just back from Nam, brothers who were mostly brothers who were in the army. Then I realized these brothers didn't have a spiritual foundation. Many of them didn't even have a good religious foundation. So I went to Ella and the committee and asked to reestablish Malcolm's Mosque. And I didn't want to be in it because I grew up in a Baptist church. My granddad was the minister. I had enough of religions in church, but I knew these brothers needed some religion, right? These were killers. These were crazy dudes. But they wanted to be in a black world. Mm-hmm. And so the mosque was established, and all of the imams around Harlem was called together for interviews. And the people who was running the committee was from the Sudan, Saudi Arabia, and from New Jersey, mostly the Elizabeth Mosque and the Newark Orthodox Mosque. And at the end of the first week, Haji Sham came downstairs and told me that I had been elected the imam over the mosque. I said, no, I didn't submit my name. I don't want to be no imam. I don't want to be over nothing with religion. And I refused to do it. So they go into another week of trying to find an imam. And Haji Sham comes down into the mosque and tells me, he says, can we walk around the block? And I said, sure. Well, that was a walk I should have never taken because he convinced me to be the imam for 1 year while they trained someone who they were sending to Sudan. And I said, okay, I could do that. If this is something Ella wants me to do for her, I will do it. And it turned out to be 11 years. It turned out to be my going to Mecca and making my Hajj and becoming a Hajj Amin Shaheed. It becomes me getting a full scholarship at the Al-Azhar University in Cairo. It comes to me being ordained by the Rabat Alim al-Islamin in Mecca to teach Islam in the West. Most people don't know this even now about me, background, but there I was, the imam over one mosque in Harlem and around the country, 17 mosques. I'm 21 years old. I don't know what to do. Tony, I was acting tough, but now stuff got real. Now I had to be tutored and trained and so forth. But between Brother Stocks and Hisham and Ella and Brother Gresham and Brother Davis, I had some good teaching. And,
interesting.
That's how I get into the heart of this. And even while I'm the imam, I'm still Ella's bodyguard. And so I spend half of my time living in Boston, in her home, meeting the rest of the family. Malcolm we know about her sister, we know about his wife, but he had 2 aunties, Aunt Sarah, his father's sister, and Aunt Gracie. Aunt Sarah had graduated from Morehouse. She was a school teacher. Aunt Gracie was a homemaker. And these 3 women, with Ella after Malcolm's mom was taken away, these are the 3 women that raised Malcolm X, along with his brother-in-law, Kenneth Collins, who was Ella's husband. And so when we see the Malcolm, everybody attributes him to the nation. But Elijah Muhammad had all of those sons he raised. None of them was a Malcolm X. So that means the instrument that became a Malcolm X was created someplace else, and it was created in the family of the Littles, a family whose history goes back to slavery as resistors. Malcolm's great grandmother was murdered by the Klan, and her husband killed those members who murdered his wife. He was killed trying to cross, and this is now during the Civil War. He's trying to cross from the Confederate line into the Union line. He was mistakenly shot. So these are stories. I think one of the kids may have done some research on this, but these are the stories I'm hearing living with the women who taught Malcolm. When I moved to Boston, they put me in Malcolm's bedroom. They gave me Malcolm pajamas. Ella would make me Malcolm breakfast. Until one day I said, no, I'm James Small. I just want to be James Small, right? And so that's how I get in the midst of it. But during this period, it's a lot of serious politics, as you know, going on. This is the 60s. I get to meet Zayd Shakur. I get to meet Lumumba Shakur. I get to meet Matula Shakur. These are the Shakur brothers. Zaid is over the Bronx chapter of the Black Panther Party. Lumumba is over the Harlem chapter of the Black Panther Party. Matula had gone to China to study acupuncture, and she was now back working at Lincoln Hospital up in the Bronx. And so I'm in this world with these young men. Most of them had been a part of Malcolm's OAAU youth group, the Shakur brothers, along with many of the brothers we knew that made up the Black Liberation Army later.
And so that the listeners might put it in content, Afeni Shakur was the mother of Tupac
Shakur, and she was
and a lot of people don't realize how Tupac became so educated is because of some of the stuff that we're talking about now.
And his mother was married to Lumumba Shakur, who was the head of the Panther Party. And they got married in Ella's bedroom, right? Malcolm's sister's bedroom. I got married a year after them in the same bedroom on Malcolm's birthday. So that's how embedded we were in this whole thing. And so that's what I come out of. I would meet you during that period a couple of years later when we had taken over the YWCA, you remember, on 125th Street, and had police trying to take us out. That was the time. And you were in the Panther Party at that time. So we come from that world of struggling in the streets of Harlem, trying to make changes for our people. And those days in our youth, these were the methodology we thought was the best method at hand. We would learn newer methods as time went on. But to come back to Malcolm, in 1965, Ella and the OAU Executive Committee declared Malcolm's birthday an international holiday. And so we wrote a proclamation and sent it to every nation in the United Nations and to all the major organizations Black in the country with this declaration that we did not want the government to declare Malcolm's birthday a holiday. We had declared it a holiday. And so the first pilgrimage the year before I got home was led by Sister Ella to the gravesite of Malcolm and Ferncliff Cemetery in Ardsley and Greenburgh, New York, which is just upstate on the Deacon, on the first exit of the major Deacon. You get out to Ardsley, New York. And we created a ceremony. I would come in the next year and Haji Sham Jabba would do the Islamic part of the ceremony. Ella would lead the OAAU part of the ceremony. And because I had taken my Shahada, I would now participate in both. Because I was in both the OAU and the Muslim Mosque game. I would, in a short time, the next year become the imam over the Muslim Mosque game. And so my role in moving around the country and trying, and the whole idea was, we created this concept called the invisible imam. No one would know who the imam was. We had multiple sheikhs and other elder brothers. Camille Wadu of the Allah Adeni Arabic Society out of Newark, who was the Comrade Mosque. We had Haji Sham and his community out of the Elizabeth Mall. So no one knew I was the E-man, because I'm the guy at the door who greeted you. I gave you your coffee. I give you your tea. If the sisters need a cloth, I'd give them a cloth to go wrap themselves if they came in pants and mini skirts and things like that. So, and then I'd have the younger imams, go up and give whatever little prayer and lecture. But I was the imam in charge and doing the work. I would do funerals, of course, which analysis. I would do marriages and those things.
And we reconnected, James, at City College, where
yes.
That's when I began to, learn a lot more about you, a lot more about many of the leaders at that time, because the Black Studies Department at that time was strong. And
we were very strong.
Sessions with everybody, Dr. Ben, all of the scholars who talked about stuff, which is...
We were so strong, we were able to make Maya Kahana compromise with us because he wanted to have a Jewish studies department.
Yeah.
Said, well, you're not going to have no Jewish studies unless you give us some Black studies. So I met with Maya Kahana, someone I had had a fist fight with a year earlier, right? On the old Finley campus. And he didn't like me very much at all. But in the compromise, me and Maya got along. Mm-hmm. So he got the Jewish votes to vote for Black studies. And I remember he said, well, I'm not going to trust you with the Asians and the Latinos and the Black. So you're going to vote first. And I go like, no, your history says y'all can't be trusted. So you must vote first. So the first, when we brought that about in the faculty council, the first department that got voted in was Black Studies Department. Then the second department was the Jewish Studies Department. The third was the Asian Studies Department, and the fourth was the Puerto Rican Studies Department. And that's what created those departments at City, and this alliance between me and Maya Kahana. And I got to like the old man after we started talking about he's just a nationalist that's a little racist, you know what I'm saying? I could work his racism, I could live with his nationalism, Unfortunately, he was assassinated shortly thereafter that. But City College became that place. This became the Harlem and the Meharry of the Northeast.
Yeah.
We were producing more engineers, more doctors than either Meharry or Harlem. We were producing more graduates. People were graduating and they were just giving them degrees. Now, if you look at the percentage of the City College graduates going on to graduate school and becoming successful in master's and PhD, more in the master's realm, we were beating any one of the Black colleges in the South. We were doing it. And it frightened the people greatly. Because the whole concept of open admissions, they said wasn't going to work, didn't really work, wasn't working, because they were measuring our children and said, okay, did they graduate in 4 years? If you didn't graduate in 4 years, they forgot about you. But we were graduating in 5 and 6 years. But we were graduating.
Because a lot of us was working, doing a number of other things, and plus you didn't see.
I remember one young man who came in through the SEEK program, and he had a reading disability and he had a little math issue, and we wanted to bring him into the new urban legal, the medical program that they had created at City College. And the white community fought fiercely against that young man, but we got him in. And when he became a heart surgeon at Harlem Hospital, they go like, okay, maybe we were making a mistake. Right?
And we're going to have at some point another show about the takeover and all of that stuff. But let's get back to Malcolm and his 100th anniversary. Tell us some of the things that are going to happen on his birthday, which is the 19th. Right?
19th of May. Yes, sir. Well, one of the major things, there are multiple other events going on, but the major event that I'm concerned with, that I participate in and preside over, is the pilgrimage to the cemetery. And in that pilgrimage, we usually have anything from 500 to 1,000 people, depending on the day of the week, the birthday fall. Mm-hmm. But this being his 100th birthday, we know we're expecting a large crowd now. And this is the 60th anniversary of us doing the pilgrimage. we do a ceremony at the gravesite that involves a number of elements. The first element is the call to prayer, the Adhan, by the Mosque of Islamic Brotherhood. And then we do some symbolic setup, as two brothers will march out and drape Malcolm's grave with a red, black, and green flag. Symbolize, the Garveyism and the African American flag. And by the way, the colors, Garvey flag was not red, black, and green. That's a myth. Garvey's flag was black, red, and green. Ella changed the colors in 1965 to red, black, and green. That's another story. But we draped the grave with the red, black, and green flag. And then two other brothers will come up, amongst those brothers go on their station and present a chair that's draped in red, black, and green with a picture of Malcolm in it. Then two sisters will come up and present a stool because Sister Betty, Dr. Shabazz, is buried on top of her husband. So even though this is a celebration for Malcolm, we have to pay respects and tribute to Dr. Shabazz. And so a white stool, always draped in white, representing ancestors, is brought up by two sisters instead at the head of the grave. And then 12 brothers in white will march up and form a square around the grave. And at that point, we ask all the children in the audience to then come and seat, and then the general public can come and surround the children. At one point, we have children that we've chosen in advance to read short portions of speeches by Malcolm. And then we ask certain community leaders and representatives to say a 1 minute, 2 minute thing, but only about Malcolm. You don't advertise your events, you don't advertise your organization.
What time is that? And what's the best way to get there? Are there buses or anything like that?
We have buses will be leaving from 125th Street and Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard in front of the State Office building. The buses that we provide, and we ever provide 2 or 3 buses, it's free. Anybody can get on and ride, no questions. So when you come, you ask for the Sons of Africa or the OAAU bus. Some buses, other community people bring, and they charge no more than $5 because you do have to pay for these things, and to bring people up to the grave site. So we know that there's at least 4 buses leaving from Harlem this year. At 9 a.m. they start boarding. 8:30 to 9 they start boarding. 9:30 a.m. we leave. Not 9:31. 9:30 a.m. the buses will pull out. I tell people, try to get there by 8 o'clock. Get yourself a comfortable seat. And it's about a 25-30 minute ride up to Brook Cemetery in Westchester County, just off of the Deacon, the first exit off of the Deacon for Ardsley, New York.
The first, say that again. The first
exit off of the Deacon Expressway. I think that's 87. It's State 87, and you get up at the first exit for Ardsley, New York, and the cemetery is in that town. It's called Ferncliff Cemetery, and it's almost a direct route from the highway. We start the ceremony at the cemetery no later than 10:30.
Right.
And it's usually about an hour and 45 minutes. At best, we may do 2 hours, but most times hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes.
Right.
In the ceremony. And during that time, you have a young woman we choose at random from the audience who will speak for all teenage kids, female. We choose a teenage young man to speak for all, and we choose him at random to speak for all teenage young men. And then we have the elders who will speak for the elders. And our presiding elders is Dr. Leonard Jeffries and Dr. Rosalind Jeffries, who have been with us for nearly 40 years in this process. The people who are handling it is the Sons of Africa, who've been with us for 35 years. And I'm the presiding officer.
So again, it's been many years. It's important for the young people to understand a lot of this stuff, because as we start to grow a little older, just like the word of mouth, passing it on to young people. Thank goodness we have the Soul Cities of the world now, and other types of, and you're all over the internet, speaking all over the world. So it's It's important. What and I guess it would take another show, but we were talking about Africa and the importance now for us to begin to redevelop if we don't have them already. I know you've been in Ghana and I've been in Ghana. You have a trip to Ghana in July.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going in December, and actually you had a hotel there at some point. You and Dr.
Yeah.
What's the importance in your view for African and Caribbean Americans to rediscover the motherland at this point of time?
It's absolutely essential. Malcolm X, who we will be celebrating on the 19th, and by the way, there will be a statue dedicated to him in Ghana on the 19th in Cape Coast.
Okay.
And a big ceremony and a dinner the next. It's going to be a 2-day celebration that's done by the community there. And we will be live streaming to them from the cemetery while they're doing their program there.
Yeah, I like to see that.
Yes. And but Malcolm, when he created the OAAU, he was trying to replicate the African Unity Organization, the OAU.
OAU.
And when he created the OAAU, he wasn't just talking about North America. And he said it in his speeches. This represented all Blacks in the Western Hemisphere. And he saw the necessity to take the concept of Pan-Africanism. And let me let people know, Pan-Africanism simply means the unification of African people. All Pan means is to unite. Nothing crazy sounding. No Pan-African organization. It's a concept of unity. Pan, you have Pan-Asian organization, Pan-European organization. Or Pan-African organization means Africans from the Caribbean, Central South America, United States and Canada will find ways to unite politically, culturally, economically, and spiritually with the Africans in the 54 states on the continent of Africa. And so Malcolm X was working towards that when he was assassinated. He had visited Africa multiple times, met with multiple African presidents, Kwame Nkrumah, Ezekwe, in Nigeria, Nyerere in Tanzania, Kenyatta in Kenya, I think Obote was in power in Uganda. So he had sat and met with these leaders to try to find what is the best way for us to bring our people together and bring our resources together so that we can not only find our way back home in terms of our history and our culture, but set up economic relationships and cultural relationships that will benefit us in the long run and benefit the next generation. And one of the things he wanted to do was to bring the United States before the United Nations for violating the human and civil rights of African American people. And it was African presidents and African leaders who was giving up their speaking time to let him do this. And someone did not want that done.
Right, which is, Peter Bailey.
Oh yeah, I know.
He and I was trying to reach him. I wanted to kind of get him on the show too because he did a lot of the writing and public relations, for Malcolm. And he has a book that should be completed now. Yeah. And he did the research. He was saying there are reasons why Malcolm was assassinated. If you look at, the various assassinations, when this organizing the African continent, bringing Pan-Africanism together, that has always been a threat.
But there's two other major.
It wasn't what was happening in America. It was when you start talking about, Africa and African liberation, and we're Africans, and with Gaddafi too, when he wanted to.
Gaddafi was killed pretty much for the same reason. Now there was 3 primary reasons that the enemies of Malcolm moved against him at the time they did, right? The first one is this attempt to go before the United Nations, and his meetings with the different heads of states in Africa to try to come up with a formula for unity. And the second was when he came back to America and had formed the OAU, he reached out to Dr. King and the civil rights leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a meeting in Queens at the home of Ruby Dee's brothers, Tom. And all of the major civil rights organization leadership came to that meeting. Dr. King was absent, but sent a rep. And everybody agreed at that meeting, this was 2 weeks before the assassination, that they would work with OAU and OAU would work with them to try to create unity between the urban America and the Southern Black Americans. Fannie Lou Hamer scheduled him to speak 2 weeks after the date where he was assassinated. So that means he would be going down in Mississippi, and a whole new trend was happening. The third reason is the one that got him killed. I think this is when they let's pull the trigger now. There was a meeting that was supposed to happen again 2 weeks after the date where he was assassinated in Algeria, headed by Ahmed Ben Bella. And it was a meeting of the non-aligned nations of the world. At that point, most Asian nations and most African nations were not aligned with anybody because they were newly independent. And so they did, and the Malcolm X was going to be the keynote speaker along with Ernesto Che Guevara. They did not want that to happen. Okay. Those three elements is the reason they pulled the trigger at the time they pulled the trigger. Had they waited 3 more days, Malcolm would have been in China. And Mao Zedong had offered him sanctuary because the attempts to kill him had already been multiple, including the bombing of his house and an attempt that would have killed his wife and children. And so Ella had already bought him the tickets. Ma had already offered him the sanctuary. And he was hoping to be able to escape this thing by that Tuesday. They didn't allow that to happen.
And it's interesting when you bring up King, as long as he was talking about civil rights, it was okay. But when he started talking about human rights, and started talking about some of the things that Malcolm was talking about, that became dangerous. And it's an interesting time. Tell us a little bit about your trip to Ghana.
Yes, sir.
July,
I've
right?
been working with my teacher, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, who took me on my first trip to Ghana.
Our teacher.
Our teacher, yeah. And we've been doing this for 40 years now. The Cultural Heritage African Tour, we first started out as the African Pilgrimage Project, and then we morphed into the Cultural Heritage African Tours. And so this year we're taking a rather large group, almost 90 people.
Hey, that's a big group.
Yeah. We used to do it in the early days, but we had a lot of the students from City College who we would take along, would help manage this whole large group, and Brother Reggie and the Sons of Africa and others. But we've got a pretty strong team put together, both on the ground and who will be traveling with the people. The Happy Group and Brother Taki and Sister Felicia is helping me lead this team. But
what's the dates, James?
Our dates are from the 25th of
July
to the 5th of August. The last 2 days we'll spend in Egypt visiting this new museum that just opened, and the pyramid.
I understand that's a fantastic new museum.
That's what I've been hearing, so I'm looking forward to seeing it.
At some point, I would like to see it. And they say it take maybe about a day or so.
Right. Well, we set aside a whole day just to do the museum.
Yeah.
Just to do the museum. But
now, how would people be able to, if there's still opportunities, how would they be able to?
Unfortunately, we've closed out because the numbers moved so fast this year.
Right.
And I've said we need to close at the number we are for safety reasons, because you got to manage people while they're on the ground.
Yeah, I understand.
You know how it works.
Actually, we're only taking 20 in December, because it's not easy to deal with a large number of people. I don't know how you guys do it.
Well, we have a good ground operation with Sunseeker Tours and Kwame Ansung and his organization. I've been working with them for nearly 30 years. And so we have a very good ground operation. And much of our tour, we visit at least 4 museums. One is an extraordinary outdoor museum for sculpting, which will blow your mind. and one is an African American museum built by this brother named Ansa out of his own pocket, right? Now, what's beautiful about Ansa, I've known for many years, and only last year he told me his big secret. You know who his closest friend was in America?
No.
Malcolm X. And he was in OAU with Malcolm. When Malcolm got assassinated, he had to sneak out of this country through Canada because of that close relationship. He's never been back to America. He built the Pan-African television station, one of the most fantastic stations in Ghana.
What's the name of the station?
Pan-African, I think it's Ghana Pan-African TV.
I have to get introduction because, you know, in December, we're going to the north. Nobody, as you know, most people don't go to the north. So we're really beginning to really promote.
Right. So I'm glad you're going to the north. I used to go up there every year.
Yeah.
And then it got to be trying to do all of that, the coastal stuff and all the stuff. Because we did it by bus. That's almost a day's ride.
Yeah, that's a day's ride. We're doing the plane thing. It's only an hour.
Oh, now I would do the plane. Back in the day.
Yeah.
But we go to Wab, Obatanga, Tamale, Paga, right on the border with Burkina Faso.
Right. Which is another Burkina Faso. That's another subject for another interview because that could cause a serious issue because they've been trying to kill this brother. And if they do, a number of countries are going to rise up, which has a direct relationship with us here. Because if that happens, and they do come to arms, which is the threat that has been, if you kill him, you're going to start a war. That then creates a situation where we have to start developing relationships to find out where are you going to go, because we might not be able to stay here.
No, I agree. And I'm so happy, you know, I've looked at a lot of your videos of your trips to the north. And most people don't know that part of Ghana is Islamic. Islamic. Yeah. There's an appreciable Catholic community up there, but it's mostly an Islamic community and have been for centuries. It isn't a new phenomenon. It's a beautiful culture, you know.
Yeah, that's you know, and it's so interesting that many of people from Accra have never been. There are people who want to go to Harlem. I want to go to Harlem to see the culture. I said, but have you been to Tamale? You know, that's your culture there. You're not going to necessarily. You might find some dashikis on 116th Street or someplace, but if you want to see the culture, you know, you're an hour by plane away. But they demonized the North because of the North's fierce, you know.
Many of the enslaved Africans that came out of the Ghana came from the northern sector. We in the early part of the enslavement process, before the conquest of the coastline by the Dutch and the British and the Portuguese, a lot of the enslaved Africans was brought from the coastline. But once that population was subdued, the population that was set upon was the northern population. And that was the population that was, much of them were newly arrivals into the area that's now called Ghana. It wasn't called Ghana then. It wasn't called anything then. It was just their communities. But that population comes from the Sudan, a lot of them, and they come from Egypt, Kemet, because Egypt was being invaded now by the Ottoman Empire during that period of time. And it was a massive migration, which no one talks about, that goes south and southwest. And so, and a lot of that population, I think the population of enslaved Muslims in North America was somewhere between 35 and 40%.
And, you know, it's interesting because, as you know, there's one major African burial ground in downtown New York based on the Wall Street thing. But there's a new one that has been discovered in Harlem, East Harlem, at 126th Street between 1st and 2nd. And the Dutch did that. They had a church where it was Harlem, you know, it was spelled differently, but and they had graveyards for Africans and graveyards for the Europeans. And one of the things, we're having a conference in August, and the the vice chair of the Council of Chiefs, Bonaparte II, is coming up because he was saying, I'm sure that many of those first Harlemites that came in from the Dutch probably came from Ghana, or either Senegal. So it's just interesting how we're coming full circle in a sense. But that location in Harlem will bring a lot of people as it starts to develop, just based on where it is.
Yeah,
And
the Dutch had three major fort sites in Ghana: Cabinda, um, um, where the Caramantes lived, the fort up on the hill, and for a while they controlled Elmina. And so thousands of the people we would call Ghanaian today, and many of them from that northern sector, would have come through there into North America.
And so tell us again, if someone is interested in going on the 15th with you, is there a number or is there some way that they might be able to call if they need more information, James?
Yeah, they can go to my Facebook site. It's called Professor Small African World.com.
Uh-huh.
Professor Small African World.com. Or they can just call me directly. And
now, before I let you go, because it's always interesting, I'm going to have you put on another hat as a consultant and advisor to the Bumpy series.
Oh yeah, Godfather.
Based on your understanding of what happened at that time, you've been for all of the series been involved with that. So you were telling me that there's a new part where Afina Shakar and the Panther Party.
Yeah, Malcolm.
You got to tell Jamal. Jamal and I might have to come in and be.
Yeah.
And give some advice.
Malcolm was the protagonist from the nationalist political perspective.
Uh-huh.
And so once Malcolm's character was assassinated, we said, what did we do? We need someone to take that place. Where is that nationalistic radical Harlem element? Well, at the time of Malcolm's assassination, what rose out of Malcolm's assassination was the Black Panther Party. And so the Black Panther Party is the primary element, and the key star is what's the sister name? Not Asada, Afeni Shakur.
Mm-hmm.
And the young, I knew Sister Afeni, God bless her soul, and the young lady that plays Afeni looks like Afeni, and she is very good. And Afeni Shakur, of course, was the mother of Tupac Shakur.
Right. And
the father, Lumumba Shakur, was a member of Malcolm X's organization before he joined the Black Panther Party after Malcolm's death.
And that's the Harlem branch. That's where Jabal and I, we all were part of that, which...
and we're focusing on the Harlem branch.
Okay. That should be interesting. I have to let Jabal know if he doesn't already. And this is, again, this series that has been going on for a while. Matter of fact, as I think you had mentioned, throughout the world, people are looking at this.
We've been working on the project for close to 10 years, but this is the fourth year. Well, really the fifth year, because we got interrupted with the strikes and stuff in Hollywood, and then the pandemic, and we lost the year. And so this is episode 4 or season 4. And I think they're now into episode 4 because they started April 13th was the first episode this year.
And that was right after I think the end of 3 was when Malcolm got assassinated.
Yeah, we started it with the trial of those who assassinated Malcolm. Okay. And the role of the Panthers seeking to avenge Malcolm's death. So, some of it, you're dealing with fiction and history.
Yeah, there's a lot of fluffing it,
yeah,
but that was an interesting time.
yes.
That
Uh,
was that was a time when you were trying to kick me off out of the campus of City
yeah.
College for selling
Well,
the paper.
we were in control, and my fear then, but then I would learn better, through the comrades, because I thought that the Harlem office had gone the way of the lumpen proletariat socialist concept of the Western office.
Right.
And that's what I was like, yo, I'm not into the socialists. No, so
Right.
that's where some of that was coming from. But I would get even closer to the party, especially through you and then Michael. Of course, me and Lamumba and Zaid was always friends. Zaid was always one of my best friends. Zaid Shakur is Matula and Lamumba Shakur's brother. That's Tupac's uncle.
Mm-hmm.
But he is the only one of the 21 that never gave up.
Right.
The Panther 21, for anybody who's heard of the Panther 21 and that whole trial that went on. And that's when our sister Shakur
Afeni
did a self-defense process that's classic
brilliant.
in the courtroom scene. And so Zaid was the husband of Assata Shakur and was killed on the New Jersey Turnpike on the day that Assata was arrested and accused of killing the state trooper. But it was really an assassination attempt, and they carried out the assassination of Zaid.
And a lot of that was going on. That's when everybody, Frank Fields and all of my guys had to go underground, and Joanne Chesimard had to go to Cuba, and she's still there.
Right.
That was that time. But nevertheless, my brother, it's been an interesting time. Hopefully we'll still be around. I'm sure that the big brother may be listening to but they already know anyways.
The big lady upstairs or the big guy upstairs or the big lady and guy upstairs. We're going to be just a little longer.
It's always a pleasure to reach out to you, man, and to talk. There's so many different things that we haven't covered. There's a lot of stuff that I would like to get recorded as relates to many of the things that happened. The whole City College takeover, what that did, to the public school system, and
there's a beautiful film out on it now.
Yeah. Charles Powell sent me that film. I think it's on Netflix too.
Yeah, it's on Netflix now. It should be. Yeah, it's called The Five Demands. It's a fantastic.
The Five Demands.
Yeah,
but that was an interesting time. I had just come out. Well, actually, I was hanging out with Frank Fields and all those guys, and Michael and the like coming out of the military. They grabbed me. They said, "Oh, you have this training? We got some." Yeah. Just like what you were saying with
work for you to do.
The brothers. Yeah, you got some training. We got some work for you to do. So, at any rate, Brother Smalls, keep up the good work. All of the best with what you do, and you won't be a stranger. At some point, and he agreed, we have to get Dr. Jeffries on, and I like to get, so people, as we start to move on, it's important for them to hear from the voice of the people that they're going to read about.
Right.
And
Jeffries is certainly one of the most extraordinary leaders. He first made his first trip to Africa in '62, but he went there after being invited by his new girlfriend, who becomes his wife, Dr. Rosalind Jeffries, who was there in '61.
Right.
And they've hardly missed a year since then. I think last year, because of health reasons.
And we'll talk about a couple of other things in another segment, even with the whole lawsuit that the college brought about, and how Joe Fleming became,
right.
So
period.
He was a genius, and he brought up but that's another story. That's just a tidbit, but there's some other things that we need to let people know about. And I'm just glad to have had you as a brother for over the 60 years, man.
And same
And you
here.
haven't missed a beat. And,
Well, we need to do a show where we just talk about the work that you did in Harlem during the years, that always have these grandchildren coming in. This is my king. So
yeah, maybe at some point. Wow. And do you know, I remember, I mean, we go back so far. Before when you guys got married, um, uh, and all of the things that were happening, your wife, she
for 53 years.
Yeah, while she was studying in med school, pregnant, I mean, there was a lot of stuff that we've been able to accomplish over the period of time. But thanks again, my brother. I appreciate you, and we'll be back. At some point, I got to get some contacts from Ghana from you, though.
Just call. I can do that because we got a lot of stuff going on the ground.
Yeah,
I'm trying to sell that hotel after 20 years, so we're in the last phase of closing. Then move on to something else. Yeah. But let's just let people know there'll be something at the Audubon Ballroom that Malcolm's Children will be doing on the 19th in the evening. I think it starts at 7. There will be a concert, and I forgot the church on Lenox Avenue. They've been doing that for 25 years. That'll be starting about 6. The December 12th movement will be having their closing down of 125th Street for 2 hours on the 19th after we return from the cemetery. There'll be a lot of different forums and things going on.
And the stores on 125th Street, most of them have agreed.
99% closed without any, they know that every year, and you may have one store, some newcomer who will not, but 99% of the people have closed their stores.
Yeah.
For that tribute, and it's only for 2 hours, once a year. It may seem a lot on that day, but when you think once a year for 2 hours for a man who took 19 bullets on our behalf, a kid, 39 years old.
James Smalls, Professor James Smalls. If you go on YouTube or if you are in any of the social media, you will see this brother talking his stuff. So I'm so proud of you, brother. Glad that we've had an understanding, and I suppose we've learned from each other for many years.
Absolutely. And we work together at City College. People don't understand that we worked together at City College.
Yeah, for many years.
George and Ed and Gene.
That's when I was on my way to law school. So, I thought I was going to go to law school.
Right. That's exactly what you were getting ready to do. Well, it's an honor, Brother Tony. It's an honor, and it's good to see you still doing the work that I met you doing. You've advanced that work.
You too. I mean, you the same. I can say the same for you. Much of what I've done, I've learned based on being with you, and you introducing me to many of the people who are not with us anymore. The Dr. Benz and all of those wonderful scholars that we now read about, but thanks to Soul City, we can see people like yourself, Professor Smalls.
Well, thank you, and thanks, Soul City. I'm glad that you've come into being. We need it.
And keep that going. So thank you.
Yes,
and for the listeners, thank you for giving us a little bit more time to talk to people like Professor Smalls, to talk to people that you might not hear on other types of streaming TV shows. So Soul City, Matt and guys, thank you again. And we'll see you next week. Take care, brother. All the best to you and the family. Give my regards.
I will. Peace and blessings.
Take care.
This is Kier Rogers, and you're listening to Urbanology with my dad, Tony Rogers, on WHCR 90.3 FM New York.
Urbanology.